Hey everybody, MLive's Baumgardner here alongside Brendan Quinn. We're back for another
Take two.
Edition of Wolverine Beat. We're doing this for the second time today as we just got interrupted by a phone call on Brendan's phone. So we're going to do this again, Wolverine Beat. This is our video chat.
As always, I'm just slowing you down, I'm dragging you down.
I know, we've got things to do today. No,
I know. Sorry, buddy.
Extended video chat. We did this last month. Got a pretty decent reception for it, so we think we'll make it a more regular deal, especially once the fall comes around and then into the winter. Right now,
yeah,
probably keep it at this pace. But
once things get cooking a little bit.
So it seemed like people liked it.
Yeah.
We got more feedback again this week, so we've got some more questions to talk about. But we've also got some other things we wanted to discuss off top. I guess starting out with the satellite cams, right?
Yeah, I mean, you were there. You were there in person on the road in Indianapolis. Yep. You were in Detroit at Sound Mind, Sound Body. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of this, you know, Jim Harbaugh kind of reintroducing himself to the college game, reintroducing himself to the thousands of coaches across the country, whatever it might be. You were there. You saw him, kind of how he interacted. That's been the biggest question. That's what everyone wants to know. So I guess aside from just him going up and talking to such and such player, how did you kind of see his demeanor, his disposition, and going through these things?
I mean, he seemed to be really enjoying himself. I mean, it was something that was it's funny. I saw him at the very beginning and the very end. Mm-hmm. So I saw him at the first stop in Indianapolis, and then the next one I went to was obviously Detroit, and he was the same. And nothing had changed. The energy was still there. Very energetic. Running around, bouncing around with kids. You saw him. Everybody saw the pictures of him with the shirt off in Alabama, and I think a lot of people think that this is all. Some of that stuff was him doing things on purpose for attention or whatever it might have been, and I don't think it wasn't on accident that he took his shirt off. Mm-hmm. I think he probably understood that people were probably watching and it was going to get out. But at the same time, I still think there's part of it that's him being himself with these kids. That's always going to be like an eye of the beholder thing. The people who depends on how you look at it. People who are hardball people are going to find it as like endearing, old Jim, out there having a good old time, old school football and blah blah blah, and he's such a normal guy. And then the detractors or people who think that this is a front end, he's kind of an attention seeker, are going to see it as that. That's like, and you know what? Else. It's probably, as always, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Sure. And it's probably a little bit of both, because he knows there's people there watching and everything else. He understands that the more he acts, I guess like himself, because that is him being himself. The more he does that in public, the more attention they're going to get, and the more Michigan stays. As a story, and that is an important part of this. He couldn't possibly be oblivious to the fact that everything he does is a powder keg. And that's an important part of this too, because they need this. People don't realize, and I said this before we had to recut, but the whole Michigan reintroducing itself to different parts of the country is an important thing, because it went away. Mm-hmm. The program struggled for 7 years. And a lot of these kids that are 2016 recruits, they were, in 2006, the last time they were really good, these kids were in first, second grade, whatever it was. So you're trying to reintroduce kids, in Florida, in Texas, in California, obviously in the state of Michigan and Ohio and all these places, everyone knows who they are. But that's an important thing, and that's Harbaugh reintroducing himself, but he's also reintroducing Michigan. And I feel like, the longer they can keep themselves, it's a lot of work for us, but the longer they can keep themselves in that headline area, I guess, it's probably the better for them. I mean, how much do you think kids actually care about the Block M, the Michigan tradition? That everyone talks about branding. That, I mean, obviously Michigan has such a higher starting point than everyone does. When a new coach walking in, you're not rebuilding the walls at a place like this. But how much, other than the kid being able to say, "I got offered by Michigan," how much do you think they actually care about the winged helmet, the M? In today's world, not as much as they used to. But I think what it is, though, is if you have a coach who's energetic enough or ambitious enough to get himself in front of some of those kids out west to remind them, and then they say, oh yeah, you guys are the place that has that giant stadium, and you guys are the place that has these facilities are incredible. Maybe I want to go to see campus now, and I never thought about it before. And then they come in and they see it, and then I think that some of that stuff sort of takes over, because it is still valuable. Their history and their tradition is it's not as valued by kids. By teenagers now as it maybe was in the 70s and 80s, but it's still one of those things, if you can get them here, you can show it to them, then it is. And I think that's pretty real. I would kind of say my 2 cents on it would be that probably of late, as their stars kind of fallen a little bit, that the idea of a Michigan offer has been kind of just like a selling point. Or just like, being able to, you can turn that into like, I just got an offer from Michigan. What are you doing in Alabama, whatever, and things like that. Whereas it should be, Yeah, that should be I want to go there now. You know, I mean, and that's what it was.
Possible end of the road
right.
immediately.
Right.
You know, the second it comes.
A destination offer, if you will.
So what do you make of all of this? The commitments that they're getting now. Obviously, there is a lot of I wouldn't say panic, but people are noticing that these are not
they're
top
not top
200,
50 guys, whatever.
top 400, in some cases top 500, top 1,000.
Yeah.
2-star kids, guys that don't have these great high profiles. Is it a matter of getting bodies, getting depth, getting whatever you can get at this point, or is it something that could actually spell the level of recruiting that this program is actually capable of right now?
I think it's multifaceted. I think number one, you said it there, it's making sure you're getting kids that really want to be here, that really want to play here. That maybe you say you got a kid who's nobody's really evaluated yet. You watched him play. Let's say this Darius Johnson kid from Alabama, the kid who was who camped there. He'd been on a visit on campus, and they wanted to see him play in person, so he camps. They see him play. They think he's an athlete. They think he's a kid who can maybe play a couple different spots for them. Mm-hmm. He's fast. He's raw, but he's fast, and he's an athlete, and he really wants to play here. So they see that, and they say, okay, we need depth, we need speed, and we need kids who are hungry to do something. Do we have the luxury of sitting around and waiting on top 50 kids to fill out our class, where those timelines might extend into February, and then you got 10 of them and you miss on 5? All of a sudden, what are you doing then? Then, if you're offering and taking commitments from kids on signing day that are 2 stars that no one's ever heard of, you got a problem.
Sure.
If you're doing it in June, then I think that's, again, it's another the eye of the beholder. I mean, if you think he's a prospect and you're evaluating talent, and you think this is a player that you can turn into something, then there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you look at up the road, Michigan State. That's how they've built their program. I mean, they went and found kids that nobody wanted. Yeah. But they were confident in their own ability to develop kids, and a lot of them have worked out really well. I think that's what this is. I think this is they're making their own list of their own top 100 or whatever it might be. And obviously, you're being more realistic. There's some kids they're going to wait on, but I think that's them evaluating talent and taking kids that really want to be here and trying to build as much depth as they can.
Is there anything, and this is coming from me, who's not obviously a football recruiting guy, is there anything to the fact that say they get things cooking a little bit early in the year, and they do find success, and suddenly it becomes a much more attractive place, but now the window is so small on number of bodies you can take. Is there a risk there?
I don't think it's. I don't think that. Yeah, probably, but I don't think it's worth waiting and seeing. I just recruiting is a momentum thing. Mm-hmm. I've had that told to me 1,000 different times, especially in football. And you got to keep in mind too. A lot of these kids, some of these kids are kids that are teammates of other players that they want. Like I know they just brought in 3 kids from Hollywood, Florida. 2 kids aren't very highly touted. I can't think of the names offhand, but they decommitted when they were here, so maybe they're going to end up here. But the point is their teammate was Devin Bush, who's a top 150 linebacker, who they really want. So, and that was part of the deal with the satellite camps. They went to all these places, and they made all these stops at places where kids they really want live. Yep. So they have their big fish targets, and then they have all these other kids who they're kind of evaluating and underneath. And I think it's just a matter of they're trying to get as big of a class as they can. The roster needs speed. It needs depth, and it needs tough sons of guns who are going to come in here and really fight and scrap, because they are not very fast. They haven't been tough, and I don't know how long. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't sit here and say that was a tough football team. They got pushed around all over the place last season and even the year before. So they need toughness, and they need scrappiness, and they need kids who can move. And
so at this point, they're not going to out-talent.
No, they're not.
They got to work half of the league.
They got to work. They got to outwork people, and that's how that's going to go. They have to rebuild themselves, and people, I don't know if they've gotten into this habit of fooling themselves that this roster is stockpiled with talent on it already that's just overflowing at the gills. I don't think that's true. There is talent on the roster, but I don't think it's even close to a level of where you'd say, well, look at Ohio State's. You are nowhere near that. You need to rebuild your roster with talent and athletes and kids that are hungry, because you don't have a lot of that right now. And they just went through spring with all these kids, and they saw that, and they went on the recruiting trail and started building back up.
Do people confuse previous recruiting rankings and things like that with actual talent?
I think so.
On the roster,
because you see what the 2012 class was a top 7 or 8 class. 2013 class I think was top 5. But what have those kids done? I mean, I'm not trying to knock people individually, but I mean, what have they done? Since then they've been 7-6 and 5-7. I know a lot of them are young. Maybe you're going to get more out of them, but they need they need more on the roster, and they need more edge and more hunger, I think, more than anything else. Obviously, they need speed because they're not very fast. But that's really the thing. They need to develop an edge about them. And the best way to do that is to go find kids that have it. Not hope that the kids already here who already struggled have it. Go find kids that have it, bring them in, throw them into the pond, and maybe that brings everybody else up. And I think that's part of what you're seeing here is you go find some kids, what is the old saying, the hungrier dog hunts best, or whatever, hungriest dog hunt, whatever it is. So I think there's part of that too. And Michigan needs to find another level of, aggression or toughness or chippiness or whatever it is, and they just don't have it right now, and they haven't had it for a couple of years.
We'll see. They got to develop that this summer. Speaking of the summer, the number one question I think that everyone has is surrounding quarterbacks, obviously. When you don't have an established number one with a bullet guy going into it, you talked to Jim Harbaugh last week about it. You talked a little bit with Shane Morris, who openly said that he's competing as if he's a backup, even though he was voted a captain over the summer. Some people kind of took that as him maybe not having confidence in himself as this potential starting quarterback next year. I didn't read it that way, but you actually spoke to him directly.
Yeah,
what did you take from
No, that's not really what he was trying to get at. I think it was more of he was the guy who after spring ball they'd said this was the best guy we had on campus in the spring, and he was trying to say that that's not going to my head. I'm going to work as if it's I'm going to work as if it's my job to lose, but I'm also going to work like I'm the guy that needs to go win it. So I'm the backup trying to overcome the number one. And I think that he said that he's met Jake Rudock and John O'Korn, who won't be eligible, but he's met these guys that have been brought here to take his spot. And I think he understands that and he knows that. And that was pretty clear cut. And Harbaugh hasn't said that. I brought in guys because I didn't think I had a quarterback. But if you look at it from the outside looking in, I mean, why do you go get a fifth-year transfer and another transfer if you think you've got a really good player on your roster that can start for you?
How can they even handle reps right now?
I don't know. I mean, you're just going to have to work through it. And I think that Morris, he's been here all summer. He was here in the spring. He has an advantage with knowing what they want to do. But he's got to put it together. I mean, this is a huge summer for him, the biggest of his career. Because if he doesn't get this, if Jake Rudock wins the job, which I think is what you're going to see, whether he keeps it all year, I don't know. If that happens, and then all of a sudden Shane Morris is now looking at maybe he redshirts as a junior or something. But I mean, at that point, if you can't win it as a junior, then what are you doing?
Right.
Because you've already got Zach Gentry's coming in, freshman. Brandon Peters is coming in next year, 2016. John O'Korn's still got 2 more years left, and you've got all these other guys underneath you. So at some point, you got to do it or not. And this is a huge sum for him. So I think he's more mature. I can see that. I can sense that. But can you do it on the field? Harbaugh said it at the end. It's not about what you say. It's about what you do.
Right.
And I think he said it's not going to be a political deal. We're just going to roll it out and see what happens.
I mean, you have to think that if they see anything in Shane Morris that says that he could be a guy this year, and then the guy as a senior, like a legit, top half of the Big Ten, good serviceable quarterback that if you put some pieces around him, you can actually win some games. Yeah, if they do see that, what is the point of starting Rudock? What's the point of starting a 5th-year stopgap quarterback who in a year that I know no one wants to admit they're not going to be very good next year. I don't think they're going to be very good next year. Yeah, very good being a 10-win team of going to a good bowl game.
Right.
I think they'll be improved, but really, what purpose would Rudock serve otherwise?
Yeah, you wouldn't have recruited him.
Other than just avoiding disasters.
I think the situation with Morris is they haven't given up on him, but they certainly haven't seen anything yet that says what you just said. Oh, here's our guy.
Yeah.
They didn't walk in here and say, well, we don't need scratch that off the list. We don't need to go find that. They walked in here and said, we got to go find some quarterbacks because we don't have one, and that is ultimately the spot you're in. I don't think they quit on the guy, but at the same time, there's been nothing that's
someone who won't implode.
That
was the thing. Devin Gardner was put in an impossible situation in a lot of ways last year, but the fact that it was a senior quarterback who was so prone to disastrous mistakes, not just
and Shane too when he was in, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's what Rudock is a guy. He's not going to rewrite your record book,
right? But maybe no game-changing turnovers and things like that. If you win 13-10, you still win.
You win the game,
right? All right, let's move on here. One hoops note. So not very much going on in basketball. Today is the
June 15th,
first day for offers for the 2017 class. No offers that we know of have been extended yet. Whereas last year's high school camp, the elite camp at Michigan, brought in some big time names, and there were a number of offers extended last year on this day. Tyus Battle, Derek Thornton Jr., John Teskey had an offer, Quentin Gooden had an offer, and a handful of other guys. But there were just very clear targets in that class. What was it, the 2016 class? Not so much this year. I think you'll start to hear more and more names emerge. There technically is not a scholarship open for that class, whereas there is one open for next year. But I've seen very little to indicate that they are looking to pick up a body that could be an extra scholarship player for next year's class. There's some talk about Jamal Murray possibly visiting, and he would be a kid who's a 2016 player but could reclassify to 2015. But Michigan is seen as being behind Kentucky and Oregon for his potential services if he does decide to play college ball next year. Either way, he would be eligible for the 2016 draft. So he can remain in Canada if he wants, or he can play a year of college ball if he wants to reclassify. And if he does go play college ball next year, I don't really see why Michigan would be a good fit. He'd be walking into a very crowded backcourt that certainly is talented enough to get minutes, but I don't know if he's walking in and taking a starting job from Derek Walton. And he sees himself as a lottery pick next year. So
well, do
the math. Well, this is true. But you can do the math yourself on that. But speaking of future players, spoke with Tyus Battle's father last Friday. Was pulled out of. He didn't actually even go to the USA U19 tryouts for the FIBA games. So tryouts are happening as we speak in Colorado Springs. When I spoke with Gary Battle last Friday, I was asking about his foot because he missed most of his junior year with a sprained foot that had kind of lingered. He only played about 9 games, really wasn't able to do much, but coming into the summer was thought that he'd be able to rehab it. Try out for the USA U19 team. He's played on previous USA basketball teams as a U16 member. Now, obvious fit was go play for U19. Turns out that during his rehab process, Tyus Battle sprained his shoulder lifting weights. They thought it might have actually been worse. He underwent an MRI.
Oh, well.
They had the results on Friday. Just showed a sprain, so that's a positive thing. His father says that he's as explosive as ever when it comes to his foot, but now it's a shoulder problem. So now he has to rehab that. He's eyeing maybe playing at Peach Jam as his long-awaited return to the floor. And when you look at this guy, he played
a lot lately.
Played about half of his sophomore year with an injury, missed most of his junior year with another injury. Now it's a shoulder injury. A lot of things have to happen with Tyus Battle at this point.
Yeah, maybe this is a good and a bad thing. I mean, maybe if it's bad, he's fighting through a lot of injuries, and maybe he's injury prone. I don't know, maybe he's not. But maybe it's also the other side of it where we've seen a lot of kids over the years that will play through that stuff just to get noticed, and it makes it worse. He's got a luxury here where he doesn't have to do that. So, I don't know, but it does seem like, certainly it seems like he needs to get stronger, I guess. I think that would be the biggest thing for him right now. Doesn't have to play. I mean, I think people are pretty confident in his abilities, but he does have to continue to grow as a player. He's still got. He's not going to be here next year, so.
Right. I don't think there's anything wrong with missing the whole summer. If that's what it comes down to. If there's no reason to play Peach Jam, there's no reason to play Peach Jam. I think you would like to see him play as a senior.
Yes.
I mean, and that he needs to put in a full season, and
as close to one as he can.
They are not. They don't fear that wouldn't happen. At this point, it's just rehabbing the shoulder. But what would be interesting would be in the next couple of weeks, we will find out if he remains at Gill St. Bernard, high school, or could perhaps transfer to St. Joseph McCutcheon, which is a very strong program in Jersey. Tyus' younger brother is now picking his high school of choice, and they plan on going to the same high school together. So if he wants to go to St. Joseph, which is about 10 minutes away from their house in Edison, New Jersey, then Tyus could very well transfer there. But there's also the chance of him remaining at Gill St. Bernard and being, or actually Bernard is how you pronounce it. Bernard. and being joined by his brother there. Right.
Yeah.
So that's high school. Basketball, very little else happening hoops-wise. They're just going through workouts. We're going to hit some questions, some quick hitters here. Let's see what we got. All right, this is from DH NGL. All right.
Where GL's at? Who knows?
Grand Lakes, is that a thing?
Grand Ledge is the place. Maybe
Grand Ledge?
We'll have to have him clarify, or her.
Oh, you're the Michigander, so you can figure this out. There's been a lot of talk from pundits, radio and online, from fans that Michigan will only improve slightly this year and has little, if any, chance of beating OSU or Michigan State. The idea that this team is destined for an improved 7-6 or 8-5 season seems a little crazy to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's not crazy. I mean, I have a hard time predicting games at this point. It's it's June 15th. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and predict the Ohio State, Michigan State games, but at the same time, what I keep reminding people, and if you can forget about it if you want, that's your prerogative. They were 5-7 last year, and they were not a good football team. I mean, they could have been 3-9 with a couple. Northwestern could have beaten them. They squeaked by Penn State. I mean, this was a bad team, and I know it had a bad coaching staff, and that coaching staff's been removed. I do expect them to improve in a lot of areas. I expect them to be more disciplined. I think the defense will be really good. I think the special teams will be much better, and we'll see about the quarterback. But I think they'll be an improved team. But 5-7 to 8-4, that's a pretty good jump to me. I mean, that's considering the schedule's not the easiest thing in the world, and it's not. Utah's a good
and with
team.
No notable influx of different bodies.
And you're still looking at the same roster that needs. I mean, you're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and everybody's going to turn into an NFL talent. I mean, they have a lot of work to do, and I think that Harbaugh's even said he's tempered expectations out the yin-yang. I mean, he hasn't come out here and said they're going to go 11 wins. They're just. If they're 8-4 from a 5-7 year and they go to a bowl game and it's a decent bowl and maybe they win it,
I think it's a win.
It's a really good year, I think, and that's a good start for you to build yourself back up. Then maybe next year it's a different situation, but that's how I see it.
And and right now, as much as any Michigan fan would hate to admit it or think about it, but I'm sorry, beating Ohio State and Michigan State
champions.
That is not the goal. That should not be the goal.
No. Compete with them and
for this year.
Maybe you steal it.
Right,
I don't know.
You look back. Jim Harbaugh's first year at Stanford. They shocked the world. And they beat USC, and that helped propel. I think it was his
first year, was it? Okay.
And propelled that program to the heights that he took it. Now, could they go out and pull off a stunner and upset someone this year?
It's not impossible. Yeah,
absolutely.
I wouldn't say that.
But I mean, what they need to do is just to reestablish this thing as a functioning football program, because that has been lacking at least since I walked through the door.
Absolutely.
From Blue Roses, with Harbaugh's various camps, events, and programs, satellite and at home, is this an attempt to widen the net for recruiting and raise Michigan's football profile? We touched on this a little bit, but how much of it is recruiting and how much of it is brand building?
That's both. I think it's right down the middle because they like I said earlier, they did put these camps in spots where recruits live. Devin Bush in Florida, Caleb Kelly in Fresno. I mean, these are Brandon Peters was one, for example. I mean, and then obviously the Prattville kids. That was on purpose. They put these camps in places where they can, because they know they've identified players there, and they want to recruit these players. They can't talk about recruiting at the thing, but that's part of it. The other part of it would be extending your brand and reminding people in South Florida and in California and in Texas that Michigan's Michigan, and it's equal parts of both. And I thought it was a brilliant move. I thought it was great for them. I don't know if they'll be allowed to do it as intense next year. And honestly, not every staff can do it because these guys. I mean,
they had to kill themselves.
On Friday, they flew back from Fresno, landed at 4 a.m. and he was in his office at 6 a.m. and then they were in Detroit at 10 a.m.
Second hardest working guy in the city behind you,
me.
Nick. in my opinion, I think it was more about brand and
could have been
and sweeping the country and look at us, Michigan.
And that's
Michigan,
fair too because they need that
because these were one-day stopgap things. They weren't going in there breaking down.
And they weren't like crazy elite camps either. They were a lot of just normal kids.
I think it was about shaking things up and reminding everyone what Michigan is.
We'll do whatever it takes.
Who these guys are.
Yeah.
And Harbaugh.
Yeah.
He was in every headline, every place he went.
Yeah,
so
still is.
I think it was far more about that than any kind of actual talent evaluation. Also from Blue Roses, which program will have a better season, Michigan football or Michigan basketball, and why?
I guess we have to define what a better season is. I don't...
My answer.
Basketball?
If the answer is not Michigan basketball, it would be quite the fall from grace.
It's kind of hard to say that one though. What's a good?
Program.
But what's a good season for Michigan basketball? What's a good season for Michigan football? That's a tough question.
That's Blue Roses. Take note. That's how you ask a question. I would gauge it more on. I think kind of the cutoff point, assuming everyone's healthy.
Yeah.
It would be Michigan basketball making it to the second weekend of next year's NCAA tournament.
Right.
I think that's top 4 finish in the Big Ten, second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Good season.
That's the bar.
Yeah.
That's the bar.
That's fair.
I think this team's more than capable
Yeah.
of doing that if they stay healthy. I mean, I always say, I love guards in college basketball. Guards win, and this team has a lot of good guards. They're veterans. They can play. They've been there. They're battle tested. They have leadership. Everyone likes to ask about the 5 position, but I mean, we're talking about, it's college basketball. How many full, complete teams are there with no holes in their roster? I think Michigan gets there. So do you. What is the level of a successful football season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just touched on it. I think, if you get yourself to 8 wins, maybe get to a really nice bowl, get 9, maybe
not
a steal.
falling in a ditch.
Maybe you steal one from somebody you're not supposed to beat. I think it's a good year. I mean, 8 or 9 wins, I think 9 wins would be a really good year for this team.
And
can they get there? I don't know.
Something you don't measure in the standings, but also a year without.
Here's the biggest thing, okay?
Comedic levels of controversy and just PR nightmares left and right.
And I'll say this, we'll move on. The biggest win for them would be 8 or 9 wins, great season, whatever, good season, you made your progress. But the biggest thing is, if you are a infinitely better team in November than you are in August, then you're doing your job, because they never did that under Hoke, except for that first year. If that's happening, then I think everything's going to be fine.
Okay. MGuy88. My question is, do you think this is a strategic move? And this is about, so this is on recruiting in the South and getting kids that are not these high-profile guys.
Right.
My question is, do you think this is a strategic move on Harbaugh's part? That is he offering scholarships to these players solely because he sees lots of potential in them, or is this about building recruiting relationships with the teams and coaches and players in talent-rich areas where Michigan has been absent?
Again, I think it's both, but I think it's more the first part. I think they're finding kids who they think are athletes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kids in this class already. They've got 4 guys who are running backs, and only probably 1 or 2 of them are going to end up playing running back. They've got guys that can play multiple spots, and they've got guys that are okay with that. They say, you're a kid who is 6'1", you're 200 pounds, you have a really good 40, you're a good athlete, you've got good feet. We can put you at 3 different spots, maybe, and you'll play there. And I think that's ultimately, they want football players. They don't want camp superstars. They don't want guys who can look good in 7-on-7. They want guys who are good football players. And it's hard to do. I mean, recruiting's not easy. So you're talent evaluating. You're trusting your own instinct on who you think's a good talent, who's not. And if your instinct is better than a guy that works at, because I know a lot of these guys that do these recruiting rankings, and they're great guys. And some of them do great jobs. But if you're Jim Harbaugh, you probably think that your eye is a little bit better than the guy running 24/7, and you're trusting your own eye. And part of it also is, hey, these kids are ready to go right now, and they'll go all in for you, and they'll do whatever it takes. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe if it works, we'll see. But I think that's what's going on. I don't think it's we're going to take this kid so we can get his better teammate. I think it's if we take this kid, we think he's going to be a player for us.
Right.
We're not just giving him a spot. That's not. I don't think that maybe in the past maybe that happened, but I don't. In the situation they're in now, where they've got a lot of work to do and they've got to build up, that doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
If they are doing it, I don't see anything wrong with that. Personally, if you're getting D to get A.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that works,
sure,
maybe it will.
A lot of bodies out there, but all right. Well, we wanted to go 20 minutes, and now it's 29 minutes, so we're over as expected. But again, we'll try to do this again. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe next month? July?
Yeah, next month, somewhere in July maybe, and then once the season starts, we'll try and do it every week or so.
Rocking and rolling a little bit.
All right, sounds good. So for Brendan, I'm Nick. We'll talk to you guys later.